Here's the overview I want you to pay attention to. So basically, on Form 944, you have to put your EIN, so your employer identification number, and you have to put your name. So here we're speaking about your personal name, not your trade name. And also you have to put your trade name, if any, here. So then you have to put the address. So you put the street, the city, the zip, everything, the state. And one thing I want to say here is that you must file annual Form 944 instead of filing quarterly forms on 941, only if the IRS notified you in writing. Okay, it's one of those things where you want to have a clear idea. You want to receive clear instruction from the agency. So let's talk about part one. So part one, you want to put your wages, tips, and other compensation. So here we're speaking about anything that is at the aggregate level. Now this amount here must match the amount you actually have on in your income statement. So when you file your P&L, your profit and loss statement, this amount must match. So here, wages, tips, we put $10 million, and that $10 million is actually the same amount we reported for our income statement amount. So here on line 2, you put the federal income tax withheld from wages, tips, and other compensation. So this is pretty straightforward. If you have maintained throughout the year, you have maintained a pretty straightforward a record keeping process, normally you should be able to get that amount really fast. So we put, for this exercise, we put $2 million. And so now if no wages, tips are subject to Social Security or Medicare tax, you want to actually check line 3. You want to check the box 3 and you go to line 5. But in our case, we did have some income tax withheld from wages, so we actually did not check that. And line 4 here, we're going to leave this on the screen so you can see the calculation. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so here you have to put your taxable Social Security wages, the qualified sick leave wages, the qualified family leave wages, and so if there is any sort of taxable Social Security tips, you have to put it there as well. And if there are any Medicare taxes and wages, you have to put it here as well. So pretty straightforward. This is our calculation for the year. So from 4A all the way through 4C. I'm going to leave this on the screen for a few seconds. Welcome back, folks, to this show. We really appreciate it. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. Moving on here, if you look at line 4D, so those are basically the amounts that you report for taxable wages and tips subject to additional Medicare tax withholding. So in our case, we had $250,000, and you followed the instructions in terms of calculation. You put $250,000 times 9%, okay, and this is 0.9%, not 9%, 0.9%. So that's the amount that we have here. And so on line 4E, so you actually add everything. So if you add everything from 4A all the way to 4D, we have the amount $1,792,650. And total taxes before adjustments. So that's the amount you have here. And line 7, total taxes after adjustments, that's the amount we have here, okay? And if you have a qualified small business payroll tax credit for increasing research activities, you have to actually put that here. We actually had some in our case, and but remember, you have to attach a form 8974. If you are claiming this tax credit, you have to attach the proper form. And next, you have the part 1. You have to answer other questions. So total non-refundable credits, total taxes. So here I'm currently on line 9. So total taxes after adjustments and non-refundable credits, $3.5 million. And total deposits for this year, including overpayments, and so we deposited $3.4 million. Okay, and so we owe 3.5, but we deposited 3.4. So you can see that basically on line 11, the balance due here is $100,000. Now it's one of those things where when you file in Form 944, if you owe, like in our case, if you owe a certain amount, like you have to attach a voucher, or you have to make the payments way before you actually file the form. Otherwise, you're exposing yourself to penalties and interest. So it's one of those things where you have to either attach the a check or a payment voucher or any type of electronic payments, you have to make that through a. I'll speak about that later on, but there is a section, there's a platform called the EFTPS where everything happens. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 944. Now let's move on to part two. So part two, basically you're telling the IRS your deposit schedule and tax liability for the year. And so it's one of those things where you have to break things down month by month. So you can see here on the screen here, line 13, basically if line 9 that we showed a little earlier is $2,500 or more, you have to actually break things down month by month. So we started from 13A, January, all the way through 13L, December. Okay, so you can see on the screen here, so the schedule for every month. And so the total amounts for line 35 for the total tax liability should actually, it's actually shown on 13M, and this is $3.5 million. And this amount actually matches the same amount that we actually reported earlier, right? And it has to match. Moving on here, part three. So part three, you were telling the IRS a little bit more about your business. And it's one of those things where the IRS just wants to have a clear idea what kind of context your business operated in during the year. Please don't forget, on any form, any page of this form, you got to put your name. Again, we're not speaking about your business name. We're not speaking about your trade name. We're speaking about your personal name. You have to put your name and also your employer identification number. So it's one of those things where the IRS wants to know who is actually filing this form so that they can have this for their record and for their records. And one thing I want to say also is that when we talk about the trade name, basically what the IRS refers to in some cases is your DBA, your doing business as. So if you have a DBA, let's say you have a regular name, quote unquote regular name, and you have a DBA, that's where you have to actually make sure that you put at the right place, but not here. You have to put your name, your first name, last name, and it is what it is. One thing I also want to say here is that when we talk about Form 944, remember that this is basically, this relates to an annual tax schedule, not quarterly. It's annual. If you remember a little earlier, I was just showing you the deposit schedule and tax liability for the year, and we broke it down everything month by month from January all the way through December. So this is really this kind of tells you how to comply with your responsibilities when it comes to Form 944. Now, part four here, this is where you tell the IRS to actually reach out to a third party, if any. So basically, the IRS is asking you if they can actually talk to someone about this Form 944. In our case, we said yes. So we had a CPA actually doing everything for us. And so his name is John Doe Preparer. So you got to put the number at which the IRS can contact this John Doe Preparer. And also if there is a PIN number that you actually have provided to the IRS, then basically put there's the at that section. And part five here, this is you who are listening to me right now. You have to put you have to sign the form. And again, here we are speaking about you filing this form manually to the IRS. There is another way to file the form. You can file the form electronically. I will speak about that later on. So you have to file the form manually here. So you have to sign. Please don't forget to sign and date the form. And otherwise the IRS will reject your form. Okay. So you want to sign and date the form, and then you want to print your name there. So you want to put your title. And so you have to put the best time the IRS can reach you when it comes to the phone number, okay? And the bottom section is for the paid preparer use only. So if you have the CPA that I was referring to a little earlier, you want the CPA to actually enter his or her information there, and so the address of the company and all the other stuff like EIN and so on and so forth, and also the zip code. And last but not the least here, you have to put the payment voucher. I was talking to you about this earlier. So if you owe, like in our case, we actually owe the IRS $100,000. So we attached a payment voucher while actually filing Form 944. And so payment voucher is pretty self-explanatory. So you have your EIN on the form. You have your name, your business name. You put your address, and you want to put actually how much you are enclosing in the form. So if you're sending a check to the IRS, then you have to specify how much that check is for. And again, I want to say that it's just a lot better nowadays to pay everything electronically. It's a lot faster, and you avoid any issue with lost checks or whatever. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 944. Let me give you the approach you need to really follow here when we think about Form 944. It's really important to understand that this form is designed specifically for small businesses, and it's actually used by employers to report their Social Security and Medicare tax liability for the year. And so this form is filed annually and is due by the last day of the month following the end of the calendar year. And it's one of those things where when you file a Form 944, you must, as an employer, you must report your company's gross wages and tips, wages subject to withholding, total Social Security and Medicare taxes, and any other taxes due for the year. And additionally, you also must include any applicable adjustments for prior period. The bottom line is you want to comply with this period, but also for the prior period. And so basically, when it comes to who needs to file this form, Form 944 must be filed by any employer who is required to pay Social Security, Medicare, or railroad retirement taxes, and whose estimated tax liability for the year is less than $1,000. Okay, and it's one of those things where you want to really make sure in which category you file yourself. This includes employers with one or more employees, self-employed individuals, and agricultural employers. And employers who are required to file Form 944 must do so even if they do not owe any taxes for the year. And small businesses such as, let's say, sole proprietorships, partnerships, and S corporations may be eligible to file Form 944. Businesses that are unsure if they need to file Form 944 should just reach out to the IRS or just consult a tax accountant. Let's just say a specialist. It can be a CPA, it can be an EA, it can be an enrolled agent, it can be a tax attorney. And one thing I want to say here is that if you do not qualify for Form 944, you might qualify for Form 941. In other words, you are going to be on a quarterly filing schedule as opposed to an annual filing schedule. And so just remember that failure to file Form 944 or filing it late can result in penalties and interest, and you do not want to go there. You do not want to actually invite the ire of the IRS. So when we talk about this form 944, it's really important to understand that you want to gather your information because, it's a form that you file once a year. So you do not want to have any mistakes in the form. And it's one of those things we're going to gather your information in terms of your business information. If you remember earlier, I was telling you that when we talk about your trade name versus your personal name, the trade name is your DBA. So everything related to your business, make sure that the amount you put on this form matches the amount you are going to put in your financial records. Okay, so things like your business information, your taxes and deposits, if there are any adjustments to taxes and deposits, if you have prior year's tax and payments, okay, you want to really have a clear idea about that. You also want to talk about refund or balance due. So if there is any balance due, you have to really make sure that you make payments. If there is a refund so it's one of those things where you need to have a clear idea. Okay, now you want to fill out the form in terms of all the sections. One thing I want to say here is that you have the ability to file this form electronically. That way, this is kind of cool because if you are not a tax expert or you have a pretty straightforward situation, you can certainly just file this form yourself. Just use tax software such as Tax Act or TurboTax or H&R Block or Jackson Hewitt to sort of file the form. And one thing I want to say is that don't forget, once you file the form, submit the form and any required payments. Okay, it's one of those things where the payment voucher that I showed you a little earlier, please make sure that you have the required payments. Otherwise, you are exposing your company to penalties and interest. And it's one of those things where just make sure that you have enough money in the account where the check will be drawn. I mean, you do not want to have a bounce check with the IRS. This is totally bad on multiple fronts, and this will get you in trouble. So make sure there is money in the account. So when the IRS goes to cash the check, there is no problem. There is no overdraft. There is no there's no so you do not want to have any problem at all. So please make sure in terms of cash inflows and cash outflows that you have enough liquidity in the specific account. So the location where you should send Form 944 depends on your city and state, okay? And so you can reach out to the IRS to have a clear idea, or you can reach out to your CPA, or you can reach out to us. As a matter of fact, just let us know in the comment section where you are hailing from, your city and state, and somebody will get back to you in terms of in terms of the location you need to send this form to. And so when we talk about filing Form 944, there are some schedules, and so Form 944 actually is an annual tax form, and so the deadline is January 31st of the following year. So for example, the deadline for filing Form 944 for 2022 is for 2022 tax year is January 31st, 2023, and for the 2023 tax year is January 31st, 2024, and so on and so forth, okay? And it's one of those things where you have to understand that when you file Form 944, as I said earlier, please just make sure that you are following instructions. Some instructions may be applicable to your business. So if you, for instance, if you want to make your FICA and income withholding tax payments on Form 944, it's important to understand that you need to calculate the amount of FICA and income tax withholding tax you owe based on the information you provided on Form 944. You got to choose a payment method. You can make your payment by check or electronically using the platform I spoke to you about earlier, the EFTPS, the Electronic Federal Tax Payment System. Okay, if you choose to pay by check, just make sure that you are designing the payment to go to the United States Treasury, and write your business name, EIN, and Form 944 on the memo line, okay? And one thing I need to say here is that there are some common mistakes to avoid when filing. Remember, failing to file on time or pay the correct amount of taxes is a mistake you want to avoid. Failing to include all necessary information on the form, using incorrect figures or calculations, failing to keep accurate records of wages and taxes withheld, okay? And if you make a mistake on Form 944, you always have the opportunity to file Form 944X. So this is actually a way to amend Form 944, and it's one of those things where you want to have a clear idea what you're really exposing yourself into. You're exposing yourself to if you ever make a mistake, okay? There are some concerns when filing Form 944, incorrect or incomplete information, incorrect calculations, for example, late filing or payments, misclassification of employees, and failure to report tips. So employers are required to report tips received by their employees. Failure to report tips can result in penalties and interest charges. So it's important to really review everything you put on Form 944 before filing. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let's quickly do a recap here. So in today's conversation, I spoke to you about Form 944. So I actually gave you the overview, the approach, and finally the steps. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll speak to you another time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.